Marcus Webb was 37 years old when his girlfriend of 4 years introduced him to her mother's birthday party as just a friend who does odd jobs around the house, and the room laughed. And she laughed with them, and he stood there, holding a gift he had wrapped himself, and smiled the way a man smiles when he has already decided something. He drove a dented Ford F-150 with a cracked dashboard and a pine tree air freshener that had stopped smelling like anything 2 years ago. He wore Carhartt jackets and work boots and kept his hair cut close and his conversation plain. Her friends called him Handyman Marcus, and she let them. Her mother, Gloria, had asked her once in front of him whether she was sure about this one, and she had said, "Mama, he's sweet," in the tone people use for golden retrievers and elderly uncles. She had no idea that Marcus had not filed a personal income tax return in 3 years, because his accountant had advised him to file through the holding company instead. The one registered in Delaware. The one that owned, among other things, a fleet of 4 private aircraft that operated under a charter service brand that her best friend Camille used twice a year for girls' trips and described as her absolute favorite hidden luxury. She had no idea that the cracked dashboard was a choice. What happened next would cost Simone everything she thought was beneath her. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The morning of Gloria's birthday party, Marcus had been up before 5, the way he always was, standing in the kitchen of his apartment with coffee in both hands and the particular stillness of a man who does his best thinking before the city wakes up. The apartment was modest by design. 2 bedrooms, clean, sparsely furnished. 1 good leather chair by the window where he read in the evenings. It did not look like the home of a man worth what Marcus was worth, because Marcus had learned, early and deliberately, that the things that announced your value were almost always the things that made you a target. He was a pilot and an aerospace logistics engineer by training. He had spent 8 years working for a defense contractor in Virginia Beach, building his credentials and his savings with the same methodical patience he had learned from his grandfather, a crop duster from rural Georgia named Theodore Webb, who had never owned more than 3 acres of land, but had understood the mathematics of air and wind and risk better than any man Marcus had ever met afterward. Granddaddy Theodore used to say, standing in the open door of a single-engine Cessna, squinting at the skyboy, "Altitude is just stored patience. You climb, so you have somewhere to fall to." He had been gone 6 years now, and Marcus still heard him on early mornings, in the quiet before the day had an opinion about itself. He had met Simone at a fundraiser in Atlanta 4 years ago. She was in public relations, and had been working the room with the particular bright energy of someone who understood how to be memorable. She had found him near the appetizer table and said, "You don't look like you belong here." And he had said, "Neither do you." And she had laughed, and they had talked for 2 hours, and he had driven home thinking she was one of the most alive people he had encountered in years. He had chosen, consciously, not to tell her. Not immediately. He had learned enough about the way wealth changed relationships to want to know, first, what she was when she thought he had nothing. He had taken his time with that knowledge. For 2 years, things were warm and real, and he had let himself believe the information he was gathering was good. Then, gradually, it had not been. The comments had started small, an offhand remark about his truck, a joke at a dinner party that he hadn't quite caught until he replayed it later, a pattern of steering him away from her professional events and toward the more casual gatherings where his clothes and his manner would blend in and she would not have to explain him. He was not oblivious. He was an engineer. He cataloged data. The party invitation had come 2 weeks ago, Gloria's 70th. Simone had framed it carefully. "It's just family and close friends. Nothing fancy. You can just come as yourself." He had understood, by then, what "come as yourself" meant when she said it. He had worn the Carhartt jacket. He had brought a gift. He had walked in and shaken hands with people who looked at him the way people look at furniture they didn't pick out. And then she had put her hand on his arm in front of her mother's friends and said, "This is Marcus. He's just a friend who does odd jobs around the house." And the room had laughed the way rooms laugh when someone lands a gentle dismissal. And she had laughed with them. Clear and easy and without a single hesitation. He had smiled. He had set the gift on the table. He had excused himself to get another drink he didn't intend to finish. And standing at that drink table, looking at the backyard full of Simone's family and her mother's friends, and the life she had decided he was a footnote in, Marcus Webb had taken out his phone and sent one text message to a man named Dwight, who was his operations director and had been for 9 years. The text said, Saturday, Peachtree DeKalb, 2 p.m. Bring the Challenger. Dwight's response had come back in 40 seconds. Done? Paint job? Marcus had considered for a moment. Then he had typed. The white one. He had pocketed his phone and gone back to the party and eaten cake and been pleasant for 2 more hours and driven home in the F-150 with the cracked dashboard and the pine tree air freshener, and he had not said a single word to Simone about any of it. Some things you let arrive on their own schedule. His attorney was a woman named Patricia Osai, and she had offices in a building in Buckhead that Simone had walked past 100 times and never connected to anyone in her life. Patricia had handled Marcus's personal, legal, and business affairs for 7 years, and she had the particular quality of mind that made complex problems feel like they had always had obvious solutions. You just needed someone patient enough to find them. Marcus sat across from her on a Thursday morning and explained the situation with the economy of language he used for everything. Patricia listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. You want to restructure how the Charter brand is publicly associated with your name, she said. I want to be findable, Marcus said, if someone looks. Patricia understood immediately. For 4 years, Marcus's name had been deliberately obscured in the public-facing materials of Webb Aero Group, a standard privacy measure for high-net-worth owners of service industry brands. It was not a deception. It was simply an omission. Anyone who looked carefully enough would find him. The point was that most people didn't look. You want Simone to look, Patricia said. I want Simone to be in a situation where looking is unavoidable, Marcus said. I'll handle the situation. I just need the information to be accessible when it becomes relevant. Patricia made 2 notes on her legal pad. And the personal matters? The relationship? Concluded, Marcus said. I just want it concluded in the right sequence. Patricia nodded and set her pen down and looked at him with the expression she wore when she was going to say something she meant carefully. For what it's worth, she said, I've seen a lot of people sit in that chair. The ones who do it quietly tend to do it cleanest. I know, Marcus said. I learned that from a crop duster. She did not ask him to explain. She picked up her pen, and they got to work. His old friend Darnell had known Marcus since Virginia Beach, since the years of the defense contractor and the shared apartment, and the late nights studying for certifications they both already knew they were going to pass. Darnell was a commercial real estate attorney now, working out of a firm in Midtown Atlanta, and he had been the best man at a wedding Marcus had called off 11 years ago for reasons that had turned out to be correct. And he was the kind of friend who did not require you to explain yourself before he trusted your judgment. They met for lunch on Friday, the day before Gloria's party, at a restaurant in Virginia Highland that Darnell had chosen because the food was good and the tables were far enough apart for a real conversation. Tell me about the girl, Darnell said, before Marcus had gotten his water. Marcus told him. He told it the way he told everything, in order, without editorializing, letting the facts carry their own weight. Darnell listened with the particular focused attention of a man who was also taking notes he would never write down. When Marcus finished, Darnell was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She introduced you as the handyman. To her mother's guests. In front of her mother." Darnell was quiet again. Then, "And you smiled." I smiled. Darnell leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling briefly. "Marcus, you have got to let me be there tomorrow. You're not invited. I'm aware. I'm saying, let me be nearby." Marcus looked at him. "Dwight is handling the logistics." "I know Dwight handles the logistics. I want to see her face." Marcus allowed himself, privately, a small and controlled thing that was not quite a smile. "I'll text you the airport." Darnell picked up his menu. "I'll drive myself. I wouldn't miss this for a direct deposit." They ate lunch and talked about other things, and when they were done, Darnell walked him to the F-150 and looked at the cracked dashboard through the windshield, and shook his head with genuine appreciation. "Your grandfather," Darnell said, "would have loved this." "He did love it," Marcus said. "I used to take him flying. He'd sit in the co-pilot seat and say, 'Boy, nothing about this plane would make anybody give you their daughter.' Then he'd laugh for 10 minutes. He climbed in and drove away, and Darnell stood in the parking lot watching him go with the expression of a man who was already looking forward to Saturday. The party was scheduled to run from noon to 4. Marcus had arrived at noon. He had stayed until 2:15, and in that window he had been pleasant to Gloria, who was a warm woman who had not initiated the odd jobs comment, and who had seemed, privately, slightly uncomfortable with it once the laughter settled. He had spoken to Simone's cousin, Deshawn, who was a contractor, and had talked to Marcus for 20 minutes about subfloor installation with the respect of one tradesman to another. He had eaten the red velvet cake and complimented the woman who made it, whose name was Bet, and who had been Gloria's best friend since 1987. At 2:12, his phone vibrated twice. He looked at the screen. Dwight. On approach. 8 minutes. Marcus set his cake plate down on a nearby table. He said, warmly and without announcement, that he needed to step out for a moment. He did not make a production of it. He walked through the side gate of Gloria's backyard toward the front of the house, and as he reached the street, Simone appeared behind him. She had followed. The way people follow when they sense a sequence they didn't authorize is beginning to unfold. "Marcus, where are you?" She stopped. The street in front of Gloria's house in the quiet residential section of southwest Atlanta was not a large street. It was a neighborhood street, lined with oak trees and the particular Saturday quiet of a place where people were mostly inside or in their backyards. But Peachtree DeKalb Airport was not far, and the airspace above this part of the city was legal and clear. And the white Bombardier Challenger 350 that appeared at low altitude above the tree line, clean white fuselage, descending in a long, unhurried arc toward its landing, was not invisible. It was, in fact, unmissable. It banked once with the gentle authority of a very large, very expensive machine doing exactly what it was designed to do, and as it turned, the morning sun caught the tail insignia, the stylized W and the small aircraft silhouette that served as the logo for Web Aero Group, and then it continued its descent toward the airport, and was gone below the tree line. Simone stood on the sidewalk in front of her mother's house, with her mouth not quite closed. Several of the party guests had drifted to the front yard, drawn by the sound. Her mother was among them. Deshawn was among them. Camille, whose phone was already out, recording the retreating aircraft, because she was a person who recorded things on instinct, was among them. It was Camille who said, slowly, squinting at the tail logo, "Wait, is that? I've flown that charter before." That's Web. That's Web Arrow. She lowered her phone. She looked at Marcus. That's your company. It was not a question. It was the sound of arithmetic completing itself in real time. Marcus looked at Simone. He said, quietly, with the same tone he used for everything, "Dwight's going to bring the car around. I have a 2:30. He looked at Gloria, who was watching him with an expression he recognized as the recalibration of a woman revising a conclusion she had reached too quickly. "Gloria, happy birthday. Thank you for having me." Gloria said, "Marcus, baby ma'am," he said warmly, "you threw a beautiful party." Simone found her voice. It arrived smaller than she intended. "Marcus, let me just—" She reached for his arm. He looked at her hand on his arm. He looked at her. He said one thing. "You already introduced me, Simone. Everybody knows who I am now." He stepped back gently. A black Escalade turned onto the block. Dwight at the wheel, unhurried, professional. Marcus opened the rear door himself, the way he always did, because he had never needed anyone to open doors for him. He did not look back. He did not need to. He could hear the silence he left behind, and it had the specific texture of a room in which everyone has just understood something simultaneously and nobody knows what to say first. That, his grandfather had told him once, was what you called proper altitude. 6 months later, Marcus was in the co-pilot seat of the Challenger on a repositioning flight from Charlotte to Nashville, watching Tennessee come in green and gold below him at 8,000 feet. And the world from up there had the quality it always had, ordered and clear and quiet, and without the noise of small opinions. He had a new apartment in Charlotte now, the one he had been planning to move to anyway, with a proper workshop and a garage that fit the F-150, and a study where he kept the good leather chair and a framed photograph of his grandfather standing in front of a Cessna in 1971, squinting at the sky the way he always did, as if the weather were a puzzle he had almost solved. A woman named Jade had come into his life through Darnell's firm. She was a structural finance analyst, precise and direct and possessed of the quality he valued most in people, which was that she said what she meant and meant what she said. They had been taking their time with things, and the time was going well. Web Aero Group had closed on a regional expansion contract in the fourth quarter. 2 new aircraft, 2 new routes, a partnership with a logistics firm that had tripled the operation's footprint in under 18 months. Patricia had sent him a bottle of good bourbon with a card that said, "Only." Clean. He had heard about Simone through Darnell, who had heard from someone who knew someone, which was how all information eventually arrived. Her PR firm had lost the anchor client that had defined her portfolio, a hospitality group, it turned out, that used Web Aero for corporate travel, and had quietly asked questions after a certain Saturday in Atlanta produced a certain video that Camille had posted, with the caption, she called him the handyman. The video had done what videos do when they contain something people find instructive. The hospitality group had their own ideas about what kind of professional discretion they required from their partners. Simone had called Marcus twice in the first month. He had not answered. He had no animus toward her. He simply had nothing to say that the Saturday had not already said better. He watched Tennessee resolve itself below him, field by field, clear and readable the way everything was from the right altitude. Altitude, his grandfather had said, was stored patience. Marcus Webb had been patient for 4 years. He had climbed steadily and quietly and built everything at the proper elevation, and when the time came, he had simply let the plane do what planes do, which was be undeniably and magnificently itself against an open sky, and let everyone on the ground draw their own conclusions. He was free. He was flying. He was unbothered. And the view from up here, as it had always been, was worth every foot of the climb. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.